For every John Cena and Brock Lesnar, there are dozens of WWE wrestlers who were supposed to be the next big thing, but couldn't live up to the hype. In this video, we're looking at every WWE wrestler who was massively hyped but failed. Kicking things off with someone who looked like the second coming of Batista. It's no secret that WWE loves a monster. Give Vince McMahon a massive guy with a muscular physique, and he'll reach for his checkbook before the guy even laces up his boots. That's exactly what happened when the company signed Barry Griffiths and turned him into Mason Ryan. The moment he walked through the curtain on the January 17, 2011 episode of Raw, standing next to CM Punk in the new Nexus, fans did a double take. The guy looked like Batista had been put through a photocopier and made 10% more terrifying. WWE thought they had their next monster heel, but the problem was obvious within weeks. Mason Ryan looked the part but couldn't do much else with it. The charisma wasn't there, the mic work wasn't there, and once you got past the sheer intimidation of his frame, there wasn't a lot holding the act together. Vince kept him on the main roster through 2011, but booking him became a puzzle nobody could solve. They couldn't turn him babyface because he couldn't connect with crowds. They couldn't push him as a monster heel because his in-ring work didn't back up his look. He got bounced back to NXT in 2013, used in battle royals and filler matches, and was quietly released in April 2014. His final match came against Tyson Kidd on NXT. Not exactly the WrestleMania main event Vince had imagined. After his release, Ryan wrestled on the independent circuit briefly before hanging it up for good in late 2015. Then came the plot twist nobody saw coming. WWE apparently kept tabs on him and brokered a call that landed him a gig with Cirque du Soleil, where he became the chief archer in their Las Vegas stage show in 2016. Mason Ryan never became the next big thing, but by any measure, the man landed on his feet and built a stable, peaceful life outside the ring. But speaking of wrestlers who were supposed to be the next big thing, almost nobody in modern WWE carried more hype on their debut night than Cara. In early 2011, WWE held a press conference in Mexico City to announce the signing of Místico, arguably the biggest lucha libre star in the world. He was so popular in Mexico that fans compared him to Rey Mysterio. CMLL had made comic books with him as a superhero. Triple H pushed hard to bring him in, and the company poured resources into the debut. Elaborate vignettes, a brand new name, and a custom blue and gold lighting rig that bathed the arena every time he made his entrance. On paper, he was supposed to be the next big foreign megastar, but in practice, it became one of the biggest flops in WWE history. Místico skipped developmental entirely and went straight to the main roster, and the collision between lucha libre and the WWE wrestling style produced a botch reel that the internet never forgot. Moves that looked flawless in Arena Mexico looked awkward and dangerous in front of SmackDown cameras. Within weeks, WWE was quietly editing matches in post-production to hide the mistakes. Then came a wellness policy suspension, then the injuries, and then the creative decision to introduce a fake Sin Cara, which only confused casual fans and diluted whatever mystique the character had left. He never learned English, which made it nearly impossible for him to connect with audiences beyond his entrance. By late 2013, Místico quietly stopped wearing the mask, Hunico stepped back in, and the original Sin Cara experiment was over. He was gone from WWE by January 2014. Back in Mexico, however, the story has a completely different ending. Returned to CMLL as Carístico, Místico found his footing again. Today, he is one of the biggest active draws in lucha libre, regularly selling out Arena Mexico, and even appearing in AEW. What WWE couldn't make work, CMLL proved was never broken. But while Sin Cara was supposed to be the next Rey Mysterio, this next wrestler was supposed to replace The Undertaker. Kevin Fertig spent years in developmental building toward his main roster debut, and the character he and Dusty Rhodes had crafted was genuinely compelling. A white-robed religious zealot draped head to toe in immaculate white who believed it was his divine mission to cleanse the sinners of WWE. The whole thing was being positioned as a long-term foil for The Undertaker, with a WrestleMania confrontation as the endgame. Fertig later confirmed he spent thousands of dollars of his own money on white suits, tracksuits, and gear just to live the gimmick around the clock. He bought into the character completely, but the fans and management did not. He debuted on SmackDown in May 2004, and his push lasted about 2 months. A backstage incident, a bar fight, and resulting legal complications spooked management, and the Mordecai character was shelved almost immediately. Fertig was sent back to developmental, eventually released in 2005. WWE gave him one more shot, bringing him back in 2006 on the relaunched ECW as Kevin Thorne, a vampire character that got some traction before it fizzled out. He was released again in 2009, this time for good, at his own request, and by his own admission, walked out the door with 15 years of bitterness strapped to his back. That resentment festered for a long time, but in 2025, something shifted. Fertig, who had been sliding toward full-blown alcoholism, made a phone call to WWE. The company put him on a plane to Tampa within 6 hours and enrolled him in their rehab program. He emerged sober, healthy, and, for the first time in a decade and a half without the rage. He told the Velvet Ropes podcast that as much as he'd hated them, they saved his life. These days, Fertig works as a real estate agent in the Indianapolis area, appears at conventions, and credits WWE with giving him a second chance he didn't feel he deserved. But while Mordecai barely lasted 2 months, this next wrestler had the entire machine behind him, trying to make him the next Hulk Hogan. In the summer of 1993, WWE had just lost Hulk Hogan to WCW and needed a new American hero. Lex Luger stepped up, body-slammed Yokozuna on the deck of the USS Intrepid on July 4th, climbed aboard a bus called the Lex Express, and toured the country as the people's chosen champion. However, fans never truly connected with his character the way they did with Hogan. He won the 1994 Royal Rumble, co-won it actually, sharing the moment with Bret Hart in the only tied Rumble finish in history. That should have been the start of something special. Instead, WrestleMania 10 saw Luger come up short against Yokozuna, and Bret Hart took the title. The wind went out of the push almost immediately. By August 1995, Luger had jumped to WCW in a move so secret even Vince McMahon didn't know it was coming. He'd appeared on WWE TV one week, then showed up on Nitro the next. He had genuine success in WCW, winning the World Heavyweight Championship twice, but the Monday Night Wars era was chaotic. Creative fell apart near the end, and when WWE bought WCW in 2001, Luger's mainstream career was effectively finished. What followed were hard years. A 2007 spinal cord injury left him in a wheelchair, but Luger never disappeared entirely. He began working with WWE's wellness program as a counselor, guiding younger talent through the same traps he'd fallen into. Then, in February 2025, Diamond Dallas Page posted a video of Luger standing up from his wheelchair on his own for the first time. 2 months later, on April 18th, Lex Luger walked to the podium at his Hall of Fame induction ceremony. It was the ending to a complicated story that nobody quite expected, but everybody was glad to see. But while Luger failed in the 90s, Vince tried to run another all-American experiment in 2010 that was even more catastrophic. Jack Swagger's WWE story is a perfect case study in a push that arrived too early and evaporated too fast. He won the ECW championship shortly after debuting, which was fine. But then in 2010, he won Money in the Bank at WrestleMania 26 and cashed in on Chris Jericho to become World Heavyweight Champion. And the crowd barely reacted. The championship reign went nowhere. And by the time creative figured out what to do with him, he was already trending back down the card. The All-American run with Zeb Coulter and Cesaro in 2013 was fun, but then he got arrested for DUI and marijuana possession. The push vanished overnight. He never sniffed the main event again. WWE released him in 2017. After that, Swagger went to Bellator and went 3-0-1, then jumped to Tony Khan's AEW as a founding member of Chris Jericho's Inner Circle. But AEW wound down for him by mid-2024, and after a handful of indie dates, Jack Swagger hung up his boots for good in August 2025 and announced he was running a freight trucking company out of Tampa, Florida. As of 2026, Jake Hager is a businessman and a dad home in Tampa with his kids. However, Swagger isn't the only amateur wrestler who flopped. Every few years, WWE signs an elite amateur athlete with a sky-high ceiling and zero professional wrestling experience in hopes of recapturing Kurt Angle's magic. Gable Steveson was the latest experiment and the most expensive failure in recent memory. Steveson won Olympic gold at Tokyo 2020 in freestyle wrestling at 21 years old, the youngest American super heavyweight ever to do so. He was a 2-time NCAA national champion, 5-time All-American at Minnesota. When WWE signed him in September 2021, it was a massive deal, with a lucrative arrangement that let him return to college wrestling simultaneously. The plan was to build him slowly, develop a character, and make him the next crossover star. But then, reality set in. Steveson spent years in NXT without generating much traction. His charisma in interviews was flat. The in-ring development didn't match the hype. By May 2024, he was quietly released alongside several other NXT cuts. His one official televised WWE match had come and gone without leaving a mark. But what followed was genuinely bizarre. He signed a 3-year NFL deal with the Buffalo Bills in May 2024, despite never having played a single down of football in his life. He was released before the season started. Then he shifted to MMA, where his natural wrestling dominance has translated immediately. He went undefeated in his early fights, finishing all opponents in the first round, and just signed a multi-match deal with UFC. The path from Olympic gold to WWE flop to NFL to UFC is one of the strangest sports stories of the decade, but Gable Steveson might actually figure it out, just not in the place anyone expected. But while Steveson was released before he had a chance to make an impact, this next wrestler was handed opportunity after opportunity and still failed. No young prospect in SmackDown's mid-2000s roster stood out more than Mr. Kennedy. The entrance, the charisma, the character, he had the whole package that most wrestlers spend careers trying to manufacture. Paul Heyman, who oversaw Kennedy in developmental, compared him to The Rock and Stone Cold. For a hot minute in 2007, it felt like that might actually be real. And then came WrestleMania 23. Kennedy won the Money in the Bank ladder match, the golden ticket, the guaranteed fast pass to a world title. He was also reportedly in line to be revealed as Vince McMahon's kayfabe illegitimate son, a storyline that would have put him in the middle of the biggest angle in the company. And then, within weeks, a triceps injury saw the briefcase transferred to Edge, the illegitimate son angle went to Hornswoggle, and the momentum derailed completely. Kennedy never recaptured that magic from 2007. By 2009, after an incident where Randy Orton complained to management that Kennedy had dropped him dangerously on his head and neck, the company pulled the trigger on his release. Just 4 days after he'd returned from injury, he was gone. In TNA, he found a second act, winning the World Heavyweight Championship twice and carving out a solid run. After that, he stepped back and opened the Academy Wrestling School in Minneapolis with Sean Daivari, pouring into the next generation what the industry had given him. He made a surprise one-off return to TNA in September 2025, tagging in his Minneapolis hometown to a warm reception, and has continued appearing on the independent and convention circuit since. These days, Ken Anderson is mostly out of the mainstream wrestling conversation, but his story remains that of a man who got right to the edge of immortality, blinked at the wrong moment, and had his name forgotten in wrestling history. And if you want to find out what happened to every forgotten WWE wrestler from the 2000s, check out this video next.